My favorite thing to do so far in 2021, I've done it every month and plan to do it next week too, is to shoot at this venue called the Woodshop for Iggy's Loudmouth podcast, the live episode. And so the podcast itself, I think it's a weekly podcast, but once a month they have this in-person event, and they have performers come in who play live music, but they also participate as a part of the show. It's kind of like a talk show, and it's a 3-hour affair, and there's really good food. The vibe is super low-key and chill and a lot of fun. But it's been a blast to shoot. I've gotten to know a lot of new artists in Chattanooga, in Atlanta, and even Middle Tennessee, out to Murfreesboro and Nashville, where I'm from. And I just find that the atmosphere is just filled with like creative energy. You know, people, the artists, their teams come through. So, you know, you've got other people with cameras. It feels like paparazzi at some points during the performances. The venue itself, the Woodshop, is a listening room. And so I think in the future they'll be doing some live streaming. And so up to this point, I've been doing event coverage and highlight videos, and then, you know, I'm helping to manage the social media for the guy who runs it. The artists on there, I mean, it's been incredible. You know, I got a chance to sit down with Suevo, who was on the Super Bowl commercial this year, you know, and last year too, I think. I got to put together a performance video for Keenan Rush, who's out of Atlanta, for his new album, Long Live the King. And so it's just fun to be able to make these connections and cover the event and put together a lot of the cool visuals. So in this video, I really just wanted to share a little bit about kind of how that's been and what I've learned from the experiences, because it's been a lot of fun, but there's definitely been learning. One of the things I've noticed about, you know, live event covers that's different is, and I've done a few things, you know, aside from the podcast, but in situations where I'm not doing the final edit. And so in this case, the first time I shot in January, oh man, I was so in love with the lighting. The atmosphere was so nice, and I don't usually get big spaces, open spaces with practical lighting setups. But what you notice really quickly is that sometimes there are these lights that have flicker, and when you deal primarily with like controllable LEDs, you don't typically run into that problem. But when you're kind of out and about in events, you'll notice a little bit of differences, not only in the fact that they flicker, also there's some like weird green cast and magenta cast on some of these light bulbs. Outside of the camera, I thought these were pretty much the same, you know, about 3200 Kelvin, sometimes all the way down to 2700, where it's kind of that amber orangey type look, sort of like what's going on back there. Yeah, there's just like green cast, and it throws off your color grade. And so one thing I noticed in that scenario is when I'm balanced for tungsten, and those lights are involved, then when I change my colors later or put a LUT on top of something or adjust the contrast, sometimes you see a lot more of those differences come out in a way that's really unpleasing. The other thing is skin tones. You know, if you're exposed for whoever it is that is the center point of one shot, the moment that you move over to someone else with a different skin tone, or maybe their skin's more reflective, or they're just slightly back compared to the other person, so one of the backlights are on them, there can be some tricky stuff, especially when you're dealing with manual focus, which is what I always use on the Blackmagic. So what I learned is that you kind of want to have a deep focus, but if you're dealing with low light scenarios, which is what this is, and so you're dealing with like these darker spaces, and you're trying to get a deep focus so that nobody falls out of focus because you're using manual focus, and you can't really stop. I mean, you have to stop down, but you don't want to crank the ISO too much because then you might get a ton of noise. So what I learned is that you have to be really versatile and movable. So the first week I went, I just took a tripod with the Blackmagic on the cage, and I took the A7S III and I had it around my neck.